Doug stared at the note again, holding it between two fingers like it was toxic. The handwriting was jagged, impatient. Whoever left it hadn't wanted to be misunderstood. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat. He looked around the cul-de-sac. The lawns were manicured, the hedges sculpted like soldiers on parade. But there was something eerie about it now. Too perfect, too still. He scanned for cameras. His own Ring device blinked blue, recording. He played back the last few hours, but saw only his own silhouette in the porch light. Whoever left the note had done it quietly and quickly, under cover of dark. He walked inside, shutting the door with a quiet finality. Ellie was at the kitchen table, typing furiously on her laptop. When she saw his face, she stopped. What now? Doug held up the note. She read it once and then again, slower, like she couldn't believe it the first time. You're kidding me, she muttered. This is harassment. We can call the police, right? Doug shook his head. They'll say it's a civil matter. That's what they always say with HOA stuff. And unless someone breaks something or crosses a line, we're on our own. Ellie's eyes burned with frustration. They're trying to scare you. That woman Constancy's dangerous with her clipboard and committee power trip. Doug didn't argue. He was already thinking 5 steps ahead. He didn't survive Fallujah just to be intimidated by a homeowners association. Still, that night, he didn't sleep much. He left the porch light on and his boots by the door, at 3:42 a.m. The Ring doorbell chimed. Doug was already halfway to the door by the time the motion alert buzzed on his phone. He peered out the peephole and saw a figure across the street. Someone in a hoodie, too far to make out a face. But standing there watching, he stepped onto the porch in silence. Didn't say a word, just stood in the light, the flag fluttering above him. His frame tall and unmoving like a statue cast in resolve. The figure walked away, not ran. Walked. The next morning, Doug returned from the hardware store with reinforced clips and fresh rope for the flagpole. He also stopped by a veteran friend's house. Masanya, retired combat medic who now painted murals. You still do housework? Doug asked. Mason raised an eyebrow. Depends on the job. I want my garage to send a message. Stars, stripes, big and bold. Mason grinned slowly. They told you to take it down, huh? Doug nodded. Then we paint it bigger. They shook hands. By afternoon, Doug's phone buzzed nonstop. The video Ellie had posted was climbing fast. 40,000, then 70. A popular veterans advocacy page reposted it. A few news reporters reached out, but the HOA didn't budge. At exactly 2:13 p.m., a white envelope was slid under Doug's door. Final warning. Failure to comply with flagpole removal will result in daily fines and legal enforcement under Section 3B of the Ridgeview Trails Covenant. Compliance. Deadline, 72 hours. Doug folded the letter in half and looked at Ellie. We're not just going to keep the flag up, he said. We're going to make it impossible for them to ignore it. Ellie blinked. What do you mean? He smiled. For the first time in days, I'm going to make this whole house a symbol. By morning, the neighborhood had changed. Not visually, still gleamed under HOA-mandated perfection, but atmospherically, like a storm was waiting just past the treetops. Doug stood in his driveway with a paint roller in one hand and a 5-gallon bucket of white primer in the other. He wore an old Marine Corps sweatshirt, sleeves cut off, and a ball cap pulled low. Across the street, 2 neighbors watched from behind their blinds, barely hiding. Ellie sat on the porch steps, phone in hand, filming him silently. Really doing it? She said, voice somewhere between pride and disbelief. Doug dipped the roller in paint and nodded. If they want to call patriotism a violation, then I'm about to violate every inch of this garage door. He pressed the roller to the panel. Thick white streaks swallowed the dull beige surface. HOA-approved sandstone tan. It didn't take long for word to spread. Before his second coat was dry, a silver SUV rolled up the street and stopped short in front of the house. The window buzzed down. Constance Lively's sharp features appeared, lips pursed like she'd bitten a lemon. She didn't get out, didn't need to. Mr. Carlson, she called, eyes narrowing. Painting your garage requires pre-authorization under Section 5. Doug didn't stop rolling. Primer doesn't need approval. You've already received notice of non-compliance. I'm aware. You'll be fined daily. The board has authority to escalate. Doug turned to face her, roller dripping in hand. You want to fine me for expressing my rights? Go ahead, but you better bring a calculator. Constance opened her mouth, but then stopped. Her eyes flicked to Ellie's camera phone, recording everything. The SUV pulled off. Fast. Doug turned back to the garage, breath steady. The roller hit the door again. A fresh coat, a blank canvas, a statement waiting to happen. That evening, Mason arrived in a battered pickup, paint cans rattling in the bed. You weren't kidding, he said, stepping out and looking up at the garage like it was a wall in downtown DC. We go in classic. 13 stripes, 50 stars. Doug smiled. Let's make it bold. Wide, vivid, no one drives by without seeing it. Mason cracked his knuckles. Hope your neighbors are ready for a revolution. By midnight, they'd penciled outlines. Each stripe measured the star field blocked in with tape. Ellie live streamed it all. Doug climbing the ladder, Mason sketching the stars. People online flooded the comments. This is America. HOA tyranny is real. You're my hero, sir. but not all were friendly. You signed the contract. Deal with it. You're bringing down property values. Hope you get evicted. The next morning, Doug opened his front door to a surprise. A bright orange sticker was pasted over his garage. Stop work order. Unauthorized alteration. Below it, a second envelope fluttered in the breeze. Cease exterior modification immediately. Non-compliance will lead to lien placement. Doug peeled the sticker off with 2 fingers, slowly, carefully, as if it disgusted him. He didn't crumple it. He walked it to the flagpole and speared it on the tip like a trophy. Ellie watched from the steps. They're escalating. Doug gave her a calm nod. Then so are we. Later that day, Doug returned from the hardware store again, this time with 2 security cameras, new exterior lights, and motion sensors. By sundown, the garage glowed under red stripes now cut across the lower panels, bright and defiant. And from the upstairs bedroom window across the street, a figure watched in silence. Phone pressed to ear. Inside that home, Constance spoke into the phone with venom. No more warnings. I want him shut down. The third morning of painting began with a bang, not the figurative kind, but a sharp, deliberate strike on Doug's front door. He opened it to find 2 men in stiff-collared shirts and matching clipboards. Behind them idled a white van with Ridgeview Trails Compliance Division stamped on the side. We're here to document violations, one of them said without even introducing himself. The other began snapping photographs of Doug's home, garage, lawn, even the mailbox. Doug crossed his arms. Don't I get a warrant with that invasion of privacy? You signed a covenant agreement, the taller one said, squinting through his sunglasses. We're authorized to inspect exterior modifications. This is routine. Routine for who? Communist China. The man didn't flinch. Expect a full report within 48 hours. Continued defiance may result in civil litigation. Ellie filmed everything from the porch again, her phone steady, her expression burning with quiet fury. Doug didn't argue. He let them finish their inspection, let them take their photos. But by the time their van turned the corner, he was already back on the ladder with a brush full of blue paint, blotting out the rectangle where 50 white stars would soon shine. Returned that afternoon with 2 more friends, both veterans, both eager to help. I heard you stirred the hornet's nest, said Ricky, a wiry guy in his 40s with burn scars that wrapped around his left hand. Mind if I add some stars to your rebellion? Doug handed him a stencil. Only if you make M sharp. As they painted, cars slowed down. Some honked. A few neighbors even walked by and nodded silently. One man, Mr. Patel from 4 houses down, brought them iced tea, but not everyone was pleased. Around 5 p.m., someone egged the house. 3 wet gloppy impacts smacked the side of Doug's garage like warnings. 1 yoke dribbled across the first finished star. Doug rushed out, but the Cara black sedan was already gone, disappearing down the hill. He filed a police report, but as predicted, it went nowhere. No suspect description, no license plate. Not much we can do, the officer said, not unkindly, but clearly uninterested. Back home, Doug scrubbed the paint clean and repainted the star. Cleaner this time, brighter. That night the cameras picked up more activity. At 2:17 a.m., a shadow crept onto his property, someone in a hoodie again, but this time, they walked straight to the flagpole and tried pulling the ropes. The light tripped. The siren blared. Doug burst out with a baseball bat, barefoot and in boxers, but the figure was already gone, just a flash of movement, vanishing between bushes, and beyond fences. He didn't chase. He stood in the middle of his yard, heart pounding, flag overhead, whipping under the cold night air, and knew this wasn't about rules anymore. This was personal. The next morning, Ellie handed him her phone. Watch this. The video she'd posted of the late-night trespass already had over 120,000 views. By lunchtime, a local news station called, then a national one. I don't want fame, Doug muttered. You're not getting fame, Ellie said. You're getting attention. And maybe that's what they're really afraid of. Constance must have felt the shift too, because that afternoon, Doug received a letter by certified mail. No envelope this time, just a thick document, 10 pages long, printed in bold font and legalese. The title read, Petition for Compliance Enforcement, HOA versus Douglas Carlson. Doug lowered the packet slowly, his jaw tightening. They're suing me, he said flatly. Ellie stared. For painting a flag. No, Doug said, stepping onto the porch and staring out at his unfinished mural. For reminding them what one looks like. The lawsuit changed everything. Doug didn't even flinch when he opened the envelope. 10 pages of threats, citations, and carefully constructed legal jargon. Every paragraph screamed the same thing, surrender. But Doug Carlson hadn't surrendered in the sands of Iraq, and he sure as hell wasn't about to do it in Ridgeview Trails. He poured himself a coffee, walked out to the garage, and stared at the mural in progress. The red and white stripes were bold, stretching side to side like waves frozen mid-motion. The blue field was almost done, 40 stars already painted. 10 more to go. He wasn't just finishing a project anymore. He was finishing a statement. Inside, Ellie was already setting up the live stream equipment. By now, their channel had over 200,000 followers. People were tuning in daily. A retired Navy SEAL had even left a comment. Doug's inbox was flooded with messages supporters, veterans, lawyers, strangers offering to donate. That's when Doug made the decision. No more passive resistance. It was time to go public. All the way. We're doing a reveal, he said. To Ellie, all of it. July 4th, noon sharp. Ellie blinked. A full public event. I want every camera in the county here. Word spread fast. Mason brought in 2 veterans from out of town. They rigged a sound system, a podium, folding chairs for guests. Local businesses donated flags and bottled water. Someone even offered a bounce house for kids. Doug declined. This wasn't a barbecue. This was war and peacetime. July 4th arrived, bright and hot. The sun pierced through a cloudless sky, baking the streets and rooftops like glass. But by 11:30 a.m., cars were lining the cold-ass sack news vans parked along curbs. A drone buzzed overhead. Doug stood on his lawn, chest out, posture military straight, wearing a faded uniform shirt with his name stitched over the heart. Ellie stood by the podium, phone in hand, watching the live view count climb into the hundreds of thousands. Just before noon, Constance appeared. She wore an oversized sun hat, a clipboard tucked under one arm like a weapon. 2 board members flanked her like bodyguards. She surveyed the crowd with cool disdain. You're all in violation, she said loudly to no one in particular. This is unauthorized gathering. You're trespassing on private HOA property. Someone booed. Doug stepped forward to the microphone. Ma'am, this is my driveway, my garage, my home. Unless you're planning to declare martial law, you're welcome to take a seat or step aside. She fumed, but said nothing. The clock struck noon. Doug gave Ellie a nod. She hit the switch. With a whir, the garage door opened. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. The full mural was revealed, brilliant, towering, unapologetically vibrant. The stars gleamed like diamonds against the crisp blue field. Every brushstroke was defiance. Every stripe a slap in the face to anyone who tried to silence him. And above the garage, fixed on a pole welded into the structure, waved the American flag, larger than regulation, larger than any he'd ever flown. Doug stepped to the mic. They told me it was about uniformity. But what they meant was obedience. They said I was disturbing the neighborhood, but this, he gestured to the garage, this is what America is. Loud, proud, free, and sometimes inconvenient for people who'd rather keep things quiet. Cheers. Applause. Someone in the crowd chanted, USA, USA, and within seconds it caught like wildfire. But as the crowd roared, Doug's eyes locked on Constance. She wasn't chanting, she was dialing, mouthing into her phone. And just then, Doug's new motion sensor lit up. There was movement behind the house. Not a protester, not a neighbor, someone was trying to sneak into his backyard. Doug stepped off the stage. This wasn't over. Doug moved fast, slipping away from the crowd as cheers echoed behind him. He cut around the side of the house, boots silent on the dry grass, heart hammering. The sun baked down on his back, but the sweat wasn't from heat, it was instinct. Something was off. He reached the gate and stopped, listening. Footsteps, soft, careful, moving through his backyard, like they belonged there. Doug yanked the gate open. The man froze. Tall, mid-30s, dressed in all black. He was crouched next to Doug's fuse box with a flathead screwdriver in his hand. Doug didn't speak. He didn't have to. The man bolted. Hey, Doug shouted, sprinting after him. The guy ran like he knew the neighborhood, cut between hedges, hopped a fence, vanished into the tight alley between 2 houses. Doug made it halfway before stopping, winded. Furious, he turned back and saw it. The fuse box cover was hanging loose. Wires twisted. They'd tried to kill the power. Doug resecured the panel, breath shaking with adrenaline. By the time he returned to the front yard, the news crews had packed up, and the crowd was beginning to disperse. Mason was helping fold chairs. Ellie was still on her phone. Dad, she asked, what happened? Doug pulled her aside, away from listening ears. Someone tried to cut the power. Ellie's eyes widened. You think Constance? I don't know. But someone wanted the cameras down before the reveal. Maybe even shut down the security system. Ellie showed him a post. He went viral again. Almost 2 million views. People are starting to tag lawmakers. There's a retired judge offering to take your case. Doug stared down the street, where Constance's house sat like a gaping mouth, waiting to devour everything decent. He spoke through gritted teeth. It's not just about the flag anymore. They're trying to break me. That night, Doug installed floodlights around the back perimeter. Mason stayed over, parked his truck right across the driveway, doors locked, pistol under the seat. Pistol. Didn't sleep much. At 3:05 a.m. Another motion alert pinged. Doug watched the live camera feed on his phone. No shadows, just ... a delivery. He stepped outside and found a small cardboard box on the porch. No markings. He picked it up light. Silent. Ellie, now beside him in pajamas, warned, wait, don't open that here. They brought it inside, scanned it. No wires, no ticking. Doug opened it carefully. Inside was a folded paper. No note, no sender. Just a printout of an old court document. Case No. CV 10342 HOA versus Randall J. Sutter. Allegation unauthorized. Mural, outcome, property, lien, foreclosure, forced sale. Doug flipped the page. The photo hit him like a truck. A mural, a large eagle's wings spread across a garage door. Just like his dot, same neighborhood, dot same HOA, dot same outcome. And in the bottom corner of the image, a younger Constance Lively, holding a clipboard, smiling beside a sheriff. Ellie gasped. They've done this before. Doug nodded. And now they're doing it again. The next morning, he walked to the HOA office, papers in hand. The receptionist looked up. You're not allowed to speak to the board without a hearing. Doug slid the court printout across the counter. Then I suggest you schedule one, because I know what happened to Randall Sutter, and now the world's about to know too. She stared, blinking fast. Doug turned and left, every step steady, the gears already turning in his head. He wasn't just defending a mural now. He was digging up a cover up. And if Constance thought she'd buried the past, she was about to learn veterans don't forget. Doug wasn't just angry anymore, he was armed up by the time he stepped back into his house after confronting the receptionist. His living room had become a makeshift war room. Court records, community newsletters, archived HOA minutes. He had it all spread across the dining table. Ellie typed furiously beside him, digging through digital records and cross-referencing names. Mason arrived with coffees in hand and a list of names veterans from the area. 2 of them lived just 1 subdivision over. One said he tried to put up a statue in 2018, got crushed with fines so bad, he sold the house and moved to an apartment. Doug added the name to the growing list. Each story was the same. Different people, different symbols, same result. The HOA had been waging a quiet campaign for years, crushing anything that didn't match the pristine conformity Constance cherished like a god. But this time, it was different. This time, it was all being recorded. Tomorrow morning, Ellie said, we go live. Doug looked up on the mural. She shook her head. On the whole thing, I'm putting together a mini documentary. There lies the threats, the sabotage, the lawsuits, the past foreclosures. We're exposing all of it. Doug nodded slowly, fingers brushing the printout of Randall Sutter's foreclosure. If they did it to him, they'll try it with me. That night he had a plan. First, he visited a retired real estate agent who once served on a rival HOA board before quitting in disgust. Doug showed her the documents, the pattern, the tactics. Lynette didn't just confirm it, she dropped a bombshell. Did you know Ridgeview Trails has never properly amended its CC and RS since 2012? Doug blinked. The what? The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The legal backbone of the HOA. If they're outdated and not filed with the county properly, they're Doug stared at her. You mean all these fines could be illegal? If what I suspect is true. Lynette gave him a flash drive. Everything's on here. Minutes, amendments, filing gaps. You'll need a real attorney to make it stick, but it's enough to cause a media storm. Doug took the drive like it was gold. The next morning, the sky was overcast, but Ridgeview Trails had never felt more electric. Doug stood in front of his garage, which now gleamed with its completed mural. 50 stars, 13 stripes, a border of gold leaf around the garage frame, added late the night before. Ellie stood next to him, mic clipped to her collar. We're live in 3, 2, 1. The video began like a film. Music, low, solemn, a slow pan of Doug raising the flag. Then his voice. They told me the flag was too large, too visible, too loud. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, they didn't want anyone to see what this neighborhood had become. Ellie spliced in footage of Constance yelling at a town meeting, the night footage of the trespasser, photos of other homeowners who had been fined or forced out. Then came the final blow, Randall Sutter's story, the court documents, and finally, Lynette's damning statement about outdated CC and RS. The video dropped like a bomb. Within 4 hours, it had 1 million views. Local news picked it up by noon. National cable by evening. And just when Doug thought things couldn't move faster, he received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county clerk's office. Request received for an emergency audit of Ridgeview Trails. HOA by order of the County Board of Commissioners. Doug turned to Ellie, stunned. They're investigating them. But it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Because at 10:45 that night, Doug received a text from an unknown number. You're not the first to dig, but you should stop. Before you end up like Randall. Doug stared at the screen, fists curling. They wanted silence. Now he was going to make them scream. Doug didn't sleep after that text. He sat by the front window until dawn, shotgun leaning against the wall beside him, floodlights casting long shadows across the mural like silent sentinels. He didn't tell Ellie about the message. Not yet. She'd done enough. This part was his. By sunrise, the video had surpassed 5.6 million views. Multiple county residents were now posting photos of their HOA violations. Some showed flags in trash bins. Others shared citations for excessive patriotic display. The hashtag flag fight began trending, but it wasn't the internet Doug was watching. It was the people behind the power. Constance hadn't been seen in public since the day of the reveal. Rumors swirled. Some said she'd hired a lawyer. Others claimed she'd gone on vacation, but Doug knew the truth. She was hiding until her car appeared outside the HOA clubhouse at 9:03 a.m. Parked crooked, hazard lights blinking. Doug was already waiting inside. 3 board members sat stiffly around the folding table. Constance swept in, ignoring him, and slammed her binder down with a thud. "You have no right to be here, Mr. Carlson," she snapped, barely disguising the panic in her voice. "This is a closed board session." One of the members, Geraldine Brooks, cleared her throat. "Actually, given the nature of the county's audit and the recent attention, I motion to allow Mr. Carlson to present." Constance's head snapped. Toward her, "You're siding with him." Geraldine didn't blink. "I'm siding with common sense. We've become a national embarrassment." The second board member, a younger man named Luis Reyes, quietly raised his hand. "I second the motion." The vote was 2-1. Doug was in. He stood, dropped a small stack of printouts on the table. "These are letters from 14 homeowners. In this neighborhood, every one of them received threats, fines, or forced compliance for patriotic displays or personal murals. 2 of them were veterans. 1 sold their house under pressure. All of them were silenced." Luis looked over the papers and sighed. "This is bad." Doug continued. "Here's the kicker according to county records. Ridgeview Trails failed to properly file Amendment 1 for B. That means your flag restrictions, your exterior modification clauses, they're invalid." Constance tried to speak, but Doug cut her off. "You didn't just overstep, you broke the law." Geraldine sat back in her chair, staring hard at Constance. "Is this true?" Silence. Then Constance muttered, "We've always handled filings internally." Luis frowned. "That's not how filings work." Doug took a breath. "I've got legal representation ready. If this board doesn't rescind its complaint, reverse the fines, and step down, I'll file a civil suit not just against the HOA, but against each of you personally, for malicious enforcement and targeted harassment." Constance slammed her hand down. "This is outrageous. You think you're a hero? You're nothing but a vandal." Doug turned slowly, walked to the exit, but at the door, he stopped. "No ma'am, I'm the mirror. You just don't like what you see in it." He left the clubhouse without looking back. An hour later, a statement was posted on the HOA's official website, effective immediately. Ridgeview Trails HOA is suspending all enforcement of exterior decor violations pending county review. Board elections will be moved up by special vote. All current fines are paused. Doug was still reading the statement when Ellie burst through the door. "You did it," she shouted, laughing. "You actually did it." But Doug didn't smile. He showed her the anonymous text, the one he'd received the night before. She read it. "You should stop, before you end up like Randall." Her face fell. Ellie whispered, "Dad, what happened to Randall?" Doug looked out the window, voice low. "They never said, but I think it's time we find out." The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across Doug's worn face. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. Victories won, battles fought, and shadows stirred from long beneath Ridgeview Trails. But today was different. Today, he was meeting with the man who knew the truth. Ellie's research had tracked down Detective Harold Manning, retired but not forgotten. Manning had investigated the foreclosure of Randall Sutter years ago, long before Constance wielded her clipboard like a weapon. In a small cafe downtown, Manning slid into the booth opposite Doug and Ellie. His gray eyes held the weight of stories that never saw daylight. "Mr. Carlson," Manning said quietly, "what you're digging into isn't just HOA politics, it's corruption, real estate fraud, intimidation campaigns designed to keep this community clean and profitable. A select few." Doug's hands curled into fists. "Randall, what happened to him?" Manning sighed. "Randall tried to put up his mural. Constance's board fined him to death. He fought back legally, but they delayed, appealed, and sued him relentlessly. When he couldn't pay, they foreclosed on his home. Official cause was non-payment, but behind the scenes, things got uglier." Ellie leaned forward. "Like what?" Manning's voice dropped. "There was an incident and accident. Maybe. A fire started in his garage the night before the final hearing. He survived, but the damage forced him to sell. Many believed it was arson. No charges were filed." Doug's breath caught. He looked down at his own garage mural, the stars gleaming brighter than ever. "So, this isn't just about flags or paint," Doug said slowly. "It's about power, control." Manning nodded. "And you're the first to publicly challenge it. You've made them visible." Back in Ridgeview Trails, the atmosphere was electric. The HOA board had crumbled, replaced with new members' neighbors who believed in freedom of expression. The county audit had uncovered multiple violations. Constance was under investigation for misuse of HOA funds and abuse of power. But Doug knew this victory came at a price. 2 nights ago, he found a painted rock in his mailbox. On it, a single word, enough. He kept it in his pocket. That evening, the neighborhood gathered for a Veterans Day cookout, on unofficial celebration of liberty. Kids ran between lawn chairs waving small flags. Neighbors smiled, shared stories, and toasted to a future no longer silenced. Doug stood beneath his mural, Ellie by his side. "Feels different," she said softly. "Like maybe it's really over." Doug looked up at the stars painted above the garage door. Maybe, he said, but freedom isn't a destination, it's a journey. And sometimes, it means standing your ground, no matter the cost. As fireworks lit the night sky, Doug felt the weight lift. The mural wasn't just paint anymore. It was a beacon, a warning, and a promise. The next morning, Doug woke to a new letter not from the HOA, but from the county commissioners. In recognition of your courage and service, Ridgeview Trails will be redesigning its community guidelines. To protect homeowners' rights and preserve individual expression, thank you for reminding us what this country stands for. Doug folded the letter carefully, a slow smile spreading across his face. Freedom, he realized, wasn't just about flags or murals. It was about people brave enough to fight when silence was the easier path, and he was ready to fight every day forward.